If you want some tips on how to shoot film and avoid getting blank rolls, you're in the right place. Hello everyone, it's Miles here from Expired Film Club. Thank you for joining me for another video on the channel here today. Hope you're all doing very, very well. You might have heard my beard touch the microphone just then. Apologies if that was the case. But here I am on YouTube and I'm doing a video today that I'm hoping will help a lot of you who are maybe just starting out in film photography and have got a roll of film that's come back blank, or you just want to try and avoid doing that if you haven't started yet, or maybe you're a seasoned pro and you just want a few extra tips on how to ensure that you're going to get a roll of film back and looking gorgeous from the lab or after you've developed it and scanned in at home. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. We're looking to get to 3,000 subscribers on the channel very soon, and we're getting there. So please do subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this video. And any questions you have, please leave in the comments as well, and I'll do my best to answer you all down there. But here we are. I've got myself a film camera here, and I'm going to show you a few different ways on how you can ensure to get the best results from shooting a roll of film. Now, I'm going to be basing this around these kind of old SLR cameras that are more manual than the others, because they're the ones that people find the trickiest and maybe have the most issues with in terms of getting rolls of film back blank. But if there are any cameras that you have that you'd like me to cover as well, then please leave them in the comments too, and I'll try my best to give you some advice. But for this video and the purposes of this video, I've got this Canon A1, which is for sale right now on my store, by the way, link in bio. Yeah, but I'm going to show you how best to load this and make sure that you don't get any blanks from rolls of film. One of the main things that means you get a blank roll of film is the way it's loaded, because a lot of the time people maybe haven't realized that they haven't loaded the film properly, and as they're winding the film on, it's actually not moving anywhere. And so I'm going to cover how best to tell if you've loaded a film correctly into one of these cameras as the first thing in this video. So I've got myself my roll of film right here, which I'm going to take out of the pot, and here it is. It's actually some unbranded expired film that I've got in the film fridge at the minute, but I thought I'd use it as a little demonstration to show you how I load my film camera to ensure that the film is in there properly. So pretty much on most of these types of film cameras, the way that you get into the back of it to put a roll of film in there is you pull up on the rewind knob here. So that's what I'm going to do with this. If you literally just grab it, sometimes there's a little button that you have to indent to unlock it to be able to pull it out, but most of the time all you'll have to do is just pull this up and yank it a little bit, and it'll pop the back of the camera open like so. Open it up, and then this is where the film goes when you want to load it up. Now, there are a couple of ways that you can get the film in there. Both of them do the same thing really, but I'll show you the way I do mine. So most of the time with these old cameras as well, it's actually a little bit counterintuitive, because the roll of film actually goes in upside down, where it looks like it might go in the other way up with the artwork and stuff on the canister. Obviously we can't see that right now, but what you do is you get the roll of film, you placed it on the same side as the rewind knob, and then once it's in there, before you do anything else, you want to push the rewind knob down, and if it doesn't go down all the way, just keep twisting it until it pops down like that, and then you know that that's locked in, and it means that that is ready to go. Sometimes if you didn't do that and it went down all the way, there's basically a groove on the end of this that slots in to the film canister, and if it doesn't pop down, it just means that the grooves haven't twisted round enough to meet the holes that they're supposed to go into. I haven't explained that very well, but you'll see what I mean when I do it. So if you push it down and it feels like there's still a bit more to go, just twist it until it pushes down all that way, and then you know that you're locked in and ready. Then you grab the film leader, which is this part here, and you pull it over to the other side of the camera where the take-up spool is. Pull it a fair way, and then you just want to tuck in the film leader into one of the little slots here. Again, on every camera this is a little bit different, so it might be a bit different to yours, but the principle is the same. And then you'll have it looking something like this. Before you close the back of it up, it's a good idea to just double check that the film is catching, and that when you move the film on, when you wind it on, it's not just going to pop off and stay where it is. So just to do that, get the winding handle and just move the film on, and if it catches and takes like so, you know you're in business, at which point you are very welcome to close the back of the camera now, which I will do. So that was a very loud closing there, but that is closed. Then after that, you probably want to fire like one shot. I just do the one, just to get rid of the exposure that we've just seen there that's completely blown out. Move it on. And this is the point where you'll find out whether the battery is also working in your camera. A lot of these older cameras don't necessarily need batteries to work, but the Canon A range do. The battery goes in here. So that's the next thing to do, is I'll try to fire the shot, and if the battery is all good, then it should be fine, which it is. So I fired that shot, and now as I move this on, One of the ways you'll be able to tell if the film is loaded properly is if the rewind knob starts to turn as you move the film on, because that basically means that the film has caught and is definitely moving on as it goes through the back of the camera. Then it's up to you whether you might want to fire like one extra shot and do that again just to make sure that you get right to the front of the roll. But sometimes what you'll get if you just do the one is that kind of first of the roll look where half the first frame is completely blurred and blown out, which is quite fun. So I normally just do the one shot, and then once you've wound it on, you are then ready to shoot. And as you go through shooting, like I mentioned, if you keep an eye on the rewind knob here, if this is turning as you're shooting, it means you've definitely loaded in properly. It might not do it at the very start because it depends on how tightly wound the film is inside the canister. So if I just rewind this back to where it was and take it out again, I'll show you what I mean. By loading your film in here, and then before you do anything, what you can do is you can just keep twisting this rewind knob until the film just starts to retreat back into the canister, as you can see there. And what that means is that this is definitely, it's all tightly wound around the inside of the canister now, and it means that when you pull it across, the rewind knob will start to move, as you can see, and that means that as you forward the camera on, you'll be able to see it advancing. So yeah, as you keep winding through the roll, just make sure that that rewind knob is winding at the same time that you're advancing the film, and you know that your film is definitely loaded correctly. Once you've done that, if you're using cameras with an internal light meter that you utilize like this Canon A1, one of the things you want to make sure you do is to set the ISO on the camera to the correct number that's on the film first of all. So on here you can see there are the various ISO numbers around the top of the rewind dial here, and you want to just make sure that that's on the right one that you're shooting. One of the things I always recommend when you're shooting expired film is to set that a little lower than the film is on the canister on the box. I'll link a video where I explain why in the corner of this video. But basically, if you're shooting fresh film, you just want to make sure that that ISO number is the same as the ISO that you're shooting your film at. What that means then is that when you go to shoot the film, the camera will be reading the film speed at the correct number, and so the settings that it recommends you, or if you're using it in automatic mode like you can do with this one, it just means it's going to be exposing it correctly. And then you're underway and you can start shooting your roll of film. Now, I've said many times on this channel that I always think it's best to err on the side of overexposure than it is to err on the side of underexposure with film. It's the opposite with digital, funnily enough, which is strange, but film definitely deals better with being overexposed to underexposed. And actually sometimes people intentionally overexpose their film to get a certain look just because it reacts so well. So if you're using an entirely manual camera, the way that you can do this basically as you're going through is to meter for the shadows. What I mean by metering is like, so with this camera, it's got an internal light meter, and as you hold it up to your eye, it'll start to recommend you settings, or it will tell you what settings it's going to shoot if you're in automatic mode. One of the things that I like to do, basically, if I'm using a camera like this, is if I'm shooting, say, a landscape, if you aim the camera at the sky, it's going to result in a very underexposed photo because the internal light meter of the camera is going to think that that's what you're trying to expose for, so the bright sky, which means that all the shadows will be underexposed. And so one of my tips for when you go out and shoot film is to meter for the shadows. To do this in practice, let's say I'm using this Canon A1. I'm not going to use it in program mode. I'm going to have it in manual mode. And so what you do is you get the camera, you point it at the shadows of the scene that you're shooting. So whether that's a portrait, whether it's a landscape, anything at all really. If you point it at the shadows and you half compress the shutter, it will tell you in the screen the combination of shutter speed and aperture that things you should use for metering for the shadows. And so what I would then do is I would set the aperture is recommended to me on the lens here. I would set the shutter speed is recommended to me on there as well. And then once I've looked at the shadows, I then raise the camera and point it to the subject or the thing that I'm trying to shoot and shoot from there. And that just means that you're ensuring that you're slightly overexposing the film, which nearly all the time will lead to a very well, nicely exposed shot. So that's sort of tip number one. Once you've got the film loaded and you're ready to head out and do your thing, meter for the shadows. I think it's very important, and that's a rule of thumb that I use with any roll of film that I shoot, whether it's fresh or expired, black and white or color. I always meter for the shadows, and it just results in nicer images, I think, at the end of it. It's a very basic way to sort of look at it, but metering for the shadows is one of my big top tips. Another big tip for cameras like this is to utilize the lock button, because what you don't want to do is put this in your bag and accidentally like have the shutter fire a few times in your bag when you're out and about. So whenever you're not using the camera, what I always do, and a lot of cameras will have this as well, is you can see there's a little dial here, and if you just turn it to the L letter, that means that the shutter is locked, and even if you press the shutter down, it won't fire a photo, because I've lost many frames to that in the past. I still do when I forget to do it. But if you've got a camera and you're out and about and you just want to make sure that you don't want to waste any frames, stick it into lock, and then when you're ready to go again, you can just flick it back round and start shooting like that when you're ready to go. And it just means that, you know, when you stick it in your bag, in your pocket, or even if you're just wandering about, I've had it a lot of times where I've had a camera like on the strap on my shoulder, and then I go to take it off and like my elbow will nudge the shutter button back, and I just fire a random photo, which isn't what you want. So yeah, if your camera's got that functionality, using the lock feature is actually really useful for avoiding any blank frames. And then it's up to you really how you shoot your roll, what you take photos of and what you do with it. I like to treat my film shots very carefully when I shoot a roll of film, just because I want to make sure that every shot counts as much as possible. But it's up to you, whatever you want to shoot, you go do your thing. And then the final tip I have is when you reach the end of the roll, because that's another place that people can sometimes get a bit lost and maybe make a couple of little mistakes that mean they lose some or all of the roll. Now, a lot of the time with these old SLR cameras, like this Canon A1 again, they have a button on the bottom that you have to impress to enable you to rewind the film. Now, you know when you reach the end of a roll because you won't be able to advance anymore, and there'll be some resistance to it. Don't try and force it when it gets to that point, because you're at risk then of snapping the film or of damaging your camera. So when that happens, even if you haven't been able to wind the film on all the way, what you do is you press the button in on the bottom and hold it, and then you get the rewind knob and you just start to turn it and turn it and turn it. And with these older cameras like this, it might not tell you on the camera itself when you reach the end of the roll. So it's best to just keep going and going. You should feel it and potentially hear it if you hold it up to your ear come off the take-up spool when you reach the end of the roll. So you feel that little sort of snap as it comes off, and then what you want to do is just give it 2 or 3 more full turns of the rewind knob, and then when you take the film out, it should be just all contained back within the canister. The film leader and everything should be within the canister, and then at that point, you're ready then to go and send the film off to get developed, or to develop it at home yourself, and fingers crossed, you'll have a full roll of beautiful photos ready for you to enjoy. But that's just about it for this video. A few little tips and tricks of how to avoid getting blank rolls. It's something we've all experienced, and sometimes you just do with film photography. It's one of those things, but hopefully if you pay attention to some of the little tips that I've given you in this video, that won't happen to you in the future. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate the support on the channel, and thanks as always for sticking around. Do leave a like, and like I mentioned, leave any comments down below with any other questions or any tips and tricks that you might have. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you again in another couple of weeks on Expired Film Club for a YouTube video, and until then, I suppose this is goodbye. See you later.